I'm Kent Myers.
I'm Mick Cornett, and it's time for the verdict.
As a part of its traditional and continuing commitment to public and community service, Crowe and Dunleavy Law Firm presents The Verdict, an objective discussion of contemporary legal issues hosted by Kent Myers. And also brought to you by a friend of Oklahoma Lawyers for Children and Delta Dental Plan of Oklahoma. And welcome to The Verdict. I'm Mick Cornett. Glad you're with us this Sunday morning. And let me introduce my co-host, legal expert Kent Myers. And Kent, another great guest today.
Well, we really do have a great guest, and we have a good friend of mine on today. We're pleased to have Congressman Brad Carson from the 2nd District of Oklahoma on with us. Brad holds a number of distinctions. He's one of the younger members in Congress. He's the only Democratic member from the Oklahoma congressional delegation. He's from the 2nd District, which, of course, as our viewers know, is in the Claremore area, the Sapulpa, Muskogee area. He is one of the brightest fellows I've ever known. I can't compare him to other people in Congress, but I know of the people that I've run across, he's intellectually just at the top of the charts. We're going to depart today from our typical format of having two guests and just ask Brad to come on by himself and discuss a number of things. Of course, first and foremost on our minds is the terrible tragedy in New York and in Washington. And Brad is closely associated with the efforts to bring about a solution to what has happened and to try to prevent other things like this from happening in the future. So I think our viewers, both in the Oklahoma City viewing area and the Tulsa viewing area, will be thrilled to have a chance to see and hear from Brad Carson.
Well, I'm anxious to get it started. Why don't we take a break, come back, and we'll have Brad Carson, United States Congressman, District 2 of Oklahoma, right after this.
This program is brought to you by the friendly people at Stillwater National Bank, with offices in Stillwater, Tulsa, Oklahoma City, and Chickasha. Member FDIC.
Upon graduation, Maisie Rogers Henricks was offered a high-paying job. She passed it by because Maisie wanted to be a teacher.
How many tens
Her
do you
goal?
have?
To help children learn.
They ran towards that.
Like all educators, Maisie puts in a full day.
Took hands with thing 1 and thing 2.
Still, she never looks back. The Oklahoma Education Association. Teaching today, shaping tomorrow.
All children deserve a life of hope and love. But sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all of the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. Oklahoma Lawyers for Children has over 350 of the best attorneys and volunteers in Oklahoma County who donate their time and services to represent children. For more information, call 405-23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
And we're back on The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers, and time to introduce our special guest.
Brad Carson, the Honorable Brad Carson, the Congressman from the 2nd District of Oklahoma. I want to tell you just a little bit about Brad and embarrass him a little more than I did in the first segment. He is a graduate of Baylor University, a Phi Beta Kappa, a Rhodes Scholar. In his law class at the University of Oklahoma, he graduated as the outstanding law graduate. And I know an attribute that Brad accomplished without any effort on his own part. He is the only enrolled native tribal member in the House of Representatives, a member of the Cherokee tribe.
Right.
And Brad, we're really thrilled to have you on the show today. Thanks for coming.
Well, thanks for having me on, guys. I appreciate the invitation.
Well, Brad, I know you've been deeply embroiled in the events that has captured the nation recently, but I want to ask you to think back a little bit prior to that. Prior to those terrible events, What were you worried about as a brand new congressman in the House of Representatives from Oklahoma, and how has that changed?
You know, it really has changed a lot in the last few days, largely because before the events of September 11th, politics was kind of centered around the trivial, or things that were important to certain segments of our population, but not to everyone. And what happened on September 11th put all that into perspective, and now we realize that decisions are being made literally about life and death, about sending troops into action, about taking out foreign leaders perhaps, or Osama bin Laden, terrorists, really weighty decisions that history will remember for generations to come. And so it's made things a lot more serious around the Capitol, and that's a good thing.
You brought up an interesting subject that I want to pursue, and that is taking out foreign leaders or taking out Osama bin Laden or others. We have, I guess, traditionally not engaged in political assassinations, although other countries do. And the CIA, I guess, is prevented from doing such by a congressional mandate. Would you expect that to be revisited? And if it is revisited, would you expect it to be changed?
You're right. There is an executive order dating from the Ford administration that prohibits assassination of foreign leaders. Legal scholars differ about whether it actually applies to people involved in military operations. I think the Bush administration would tell you, and I think they're right, that we could perhaps assassinate Osama bin Laden, and that wouldn't cause any problem for us underneath that executive order. But I do think the executive order is going to be looked at as well, as it should. People like Osama bin Laden are involved in command and control of military units, and so they are a legitimate military target for us.
I want to change the subject just a minute. We'll get back to that. One thing that is on everyone's mind, aside from this tragedy, everyone's mind in Oklahoma is congressional redistricting. You're a member of Congress. You're going to be involved and affected by the congressional redistricting that our legislature engages in. What do you envision coming out of the Oklahoma legislature insofar as redistricting is concerned?
Well, I think it's one of the most unpleasant experiences anybody in Congress can ever have when you're losing a seat, as we are in Oklahoma, going from 6 to 5. Someone is obviously not going to be a congressman in 2002. And so it's a very difficult situation. There are a lot of plans floating about, 20, 25 different plans that I've seen that are going to be interesting to see. No one really knows which one is going to carry the day. My district, I'm confident, will still cover much of eastern Oklahoma, but all the districts are going to have to become more urban. The population growth is in Tulsa, Oklahoma City, Cleveland County, Rogers County, and so the districts are all going to have to come in and at least take suburbs, if not actually part of the urban areas.
Well, what's your prediction? Let me put you on the spot. What's your prediction?
It's difficult to say, really. My district has grown more than any others as Grand Lake has expanded and the lakes, and a lot of retirees have moved in. And so my district will probably change less than any. And so it's really impossible to say. I think you'll still see an Oklahoma City-based district, a Tulsa-based district, and then the other 3 districts will be focused in the southeast, coming over to the southwest, one of the northwest, kind of coming into central Oklahoma, and then my district will remain a northeast one.
So if your district remains as it does, it's unlikely you would be running against any incumbent congressman.
It seems unlikely. Democrats control the legislature, of course, and it's a fiercely partisan battle many times in redistricting. And so I think the population loss has been out in western Oklahoma. The Great Plains is losing population throughout up the Canada border. And so it's probably going to be some consolidation out in that area, more so than on the eastern half of the state.
All right, I want to go back now to what we started out talking about, and those are the terrible events in New York and in Washington. I know that you were a White House fellow and spent some time in the Pentagon for about a year, I think, slightly over a year. The Pentagon was hit. Did you know anyone, or did you have any friends or acquaintances affected by that tragedy?
I did not know anyone personally who was killed in that tragic accident, and I thank God for that. But I knew that area well. I said the Army corridor where the plane went in is an area I was quite familiar with. And so I knew so many great people who worked at the Pentagon, civil servants, active duty military who were assigned there. And it really is a tragedy that nearly 200 people working at the Pentagon died, in addition to the even larger tragedy up in New York.
Brad, with the increased security, which I think we're almost certainly going to see, it seems that Americans are, to a large extent, and justifiably so, worried that they're going to lose some of their freedom. How do you weigh that between a citizen's right to freedom and a need for increased security?
Well, we have to have maximum security with minimal intervention on our civil liberties. And I think you're going to see, a balance struck that kind of modernizes some of our laws about wiretapping, about eavesdropping, kind of takes them into the cyber age. We have to update these laws recognizing that people don't use the telephone as much anymore as they do email, as they do other forms of electronic communication. So you're going to see some updating there, but I don't think you're going to see a massive invasion of our civil liberties. I don't think that's necessary. The first line of defense has to be better intelligence and preventing these kind of activities in the first place.
So you would favor increased spending in the intelligence area?
We have to do that. There's no question that we have to have more human intelligence, more technical intelligence. We have to have more people who speak Arabic, people who understand Islamic culture, who can evaluate this, and other groups around the world, too, who bear ill will toward the United States.
Brad, I know you're on the Aviation Committee, or the Transportation Committee it is, and you've been actively involved in the activities recently about the aviation industry. I'd like to bring up a quote on a graphic that we can all take a look at. And I'm quoting from a statement that you made in front of the committee on transportation and infrastructure. And I want to talk down to the white and stop. You said, we must make sure that American travelers feel safe and secure when traveling in the United States and abroad. And we'll stop the quote at that point, and let me ask you about that. What do you envision happening that will make American travelers feel safe and secure?
There are really some common sense measures that aren't particularly costly nor invasive. Things like putting a steel door on the cockpit where people can't break into that. Making sure our screeners are better trained and better paid, where they're professionals and that you can rely on them to make sure that guns or knives or bombs don't get through. It shocked me. I was naive about airport security. I thought every checked bag, for example, was screened by an X-ray machine or a bomb detection machine. Far from it. Only about 1 to 5% of bags are checked at all. Europe is going to a system where they check 100% of the bags that are checked through. That seems to me to be a sensible approach that will reassure people that the airways are safe again. In addition, there's a lot of discussion. I think it's in the right direction about putting sky marshals on our planes, people who are plainclothes, trained for interdiction of criminals aboard flights.
Let me interject here, and let's take us to a break. We'll be right back. We're speaking with Congressman Brad Carson. This is The Verdict. We'll return.
Yeah, campfire's a lot of fun. You get to make some friends. You get to do some cool stuff. Campfire's for boys too, not just girls. But hey, campfire's definitely for kids. So call the campfire office nearest you to join in on the fun. 'Cause let's face it, you're not getting any younger.
St. Gregory's University has been changing the lives of people like me for 125 years. Affordable private Catholic education, balanced with dedication to community and service, makes St. Gregory special. We're extremely proud of our students' outstanding academic achievements and our nationally ranked athletic teams. It's when you help a student build a future of balance, integrity, and service that you change a life forever. St. Gregory's, a community for life.
Yesterday was plain awful.
You can say that again.
On Broadway is Oklahoma's premier youth musical theater company.
Bringing our daughter here was one of the smartest things we've ever done.
I've learned a lot. I've gained a lot of confidence. They helped me develop talents I never knew I had.
And it's fun.
On Broadway, Oklahoma's premier youth musical theater company. Now enrolling in Edmond. Call 330-CAST. That's 330-2278.
Every day, in state governments throughout the country, crucial decisions are being made that affect the lives of children and their families. But as this process takes place, children are often left voiceless. When these children raise their hands to be heard, is anyone listening? There are people listening. They are child advocates. Join us and raise your hand for kids.
And we're back on The Verdict. Congressman Brad Carson and Kent Myers.
Brad, I've read and heard about something that is referred to as the El Al approach to airport security. I understand El Al to be the Israeli airline. You've been there recently. Tell our viewers what's involved in the El Al approach. What's that mean?
Well, with Israel, of course, facing such a tremendous security threat from terrorism, they take it very seriously. They have very professional screeners. You go through multiple screens where they check ID, looking not simply to see if the face and name match up, but if there's any identification material on there that might be suspect or questionable. Every bag is x-rayed and put through a bomb detection system. You have to show up 2-3 hours sometimes before you get on the plane. One time when I was flying on L, I got whisked back into a private room where I was patted down, had to take off articles of clothing to make sure I wasn't carrying anything on there. And on board the planes themselves, there's both a steel door that can't be broken into and several sky marshals, people who are armed and capable of, in the worst case, shooting someone who wants to hijack the plane.
Well, are the pilots armed?
I don't believe the pilots are armed. They're behind a steel door. They have people on board, trained law enforcement officials who are experts in aviation security who are on board with arms.
Brad, when a plane gets hijacked, and in this last instance, we had hijacked planes that were headed for sensitive areas, World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and our military was authorized at one point to shoot down a plane with civilians on it. How do you feel about that?
It's a tragic decision, but I think President Bush and Vice President Cheney made the right decision in authorizing the military to do that. You know, no one wants to be put in that very, very difficult position, but when it's going to do greater damage, perhaps kill thousands of people, if not more, perhaps could be loaded with chemical or biological weapons, then, you know, you have to take those kind of difficult judgments that are needed for security.
I know that you are a strong supporter of gun rights. You believe the Second Amendment does entitle citizens to bear arms under only the most minimal safeguards. What do you think about the proposal that has been mentioned to allow the pilots to be armed on the plane?
You know, you're right. I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. I'm a bit more skeptical of the idea of arming people on board the plane with weapons unless they're trained law enforcement officials. There's been some discussion.
Like sky marshals.
Right. Sky marshals, I think, who are trained, who are policemen, who are professionals, I think are a good idea. But there's been some discussion about arming even flight attendants with tasers and pilots with pistols, and some of the pilots' unions now favor that. You know, I think it's dangerous because you have a situation where then security on the ground becomes less important. You can go through security without a weapon. Then if you overpower a flight attendant or a pilot, you can have a pistol or a weapon on board. And many times the pilots are strapped in. They're thinking about other issues rather than trying to defend the plane. So I think we'd be better off with that steel door where no one can kick into the cockpit and trying to make sure that no one, including the flight attendants, has a weapon on board that can be taken away from them and then used for hijacking.
Let's bring back up the graphic that we showed a few minutes ago. And I want to talk about the bottom part of it now after the word and that the aviation industry is economically viable. Do you think, Brad, that substantial federal subsidies are going to be necessary to keep the aviation industry economically viable?
They are going to be necessary. It was going to be a bad year for the airlines in any event. The slowing down of the economy, they're projected to lose about $4 billion this year. With the events on September 11th, the reduced flight schedule, many times they're expecting only about 40 to 50% of the traffic that they otherwise would have had. The losses could be between $25 and $30 billion. And so there is going to be a package. The President has already signed that, in fact, about $5 billion in direct cash assistance to keep them afloat, about $15 billion more in loan guarantees where they can go to the capital markets and get financing. And it's so important. Airlines are a symbol of our global power. They're important to global commerce. They're important for day-to-day business. And so many jobs rely upon them. It's essential we keep the airlines afloat.
Do you envision the hard times to bring about more consolidation among the airlines, more mergers, or do you envision diversification, new airlines coming in, banking on subsidies and loan guarantees?
Well, I don't think you're going to see any new airlines come in. The subsidies and the loan guarantees are going to only those carriers who were in business before September 11th, and they're allocated based on what percentage of traffic is lost due to the tragic events on September 11th. I think you could possibly see a move toward consolidation. The airline industry was in flux, as I mentioned. It's difficult times. But everyone who flies a lot realizes there's some dangers to consolidation, antitrust concerns, that routes aren't being flown as much as they should be, and service is declining. And so I would like to see us keep the same number of carriers. It'd be nice to have some new carriers as well, make it less of a monopoly industry. But as it was going, we could have all the carriers out of business with the exception of one or two.
Brad, we had this federal budget surplus projected, as far as I know, as far as we could see. Is that gone?
That is gone. That debate about the lockbox that was raging so much before September 11th, nobody even talks about that anymore. We're projected to have, as much as a couple $100 billion surplus next year. It's now said we're going to be slightly in deficit, and for the year after that, we could be between $10 and $70 billion in deficit. We're on war footing. It's right to be worried less about keeping the budget in line than it is about protecting our people and protecting our economy. So that's the right thing to do. But it's a long-term concern that we have to get the budget back in line, that after we take care of Osama bin Laden and terrorism, we need to worry about the budget again. But the
You're acting like that's a
gone.
winnable war. I mean, you're saying after we do that, as if that's
it is a
going to be
winnable.
a conclusion.
It is a winnable war. President Bush is right in saying it's not going to be a short war. He said there's no easy victories here. There's no benchmarks are going to be reached quickly. But it is a winnable war, and it's essential if we're going to maintain our presence in the Middle East, if we're going to maintain a vibrant economy, if we're going to maintain a free society. We have to win this war, and I'm confident we can, but it won't be easy.
The president said that he was going to go after terrorists and the states that took care of them, that harbored them, that fostered them. Do you have any prediction on any states that may be involved in that action?
Well, I think Afghanistan is certainly at the top of that target list, and Iraq is not far behind. There are many people in the government today who think we made a mistake in 1990 in not removing Saddam Hussein from power. I think they're right about that, and I think Saddam Hussein could easily be added to the target list. Certainly we're going to have a change in government in Afghanistan. The Taliban is short for the world. I think Saddam Hussein could be the next.
Brad, I'd like to give you 30 seconds here to a minute to kind of sum up any thoughts that you'd like to address to our audience that maybe we haven't brought up.
Well, these are difficult times for our country, of course, and we encourage everyone to keep the President and Congress in their thoughts and prayers, and says fly that flag and keep our soldiers and seamen, airmen, and Marines also in their thoughts and prayers. And so this is a battle that will be won, but it won't be like past conflicts where it's easily done so. And so we need to gird down, be diligent, and get back to normalcy, but do so with the sense that it's a new environment. We have to be diligent and keep our leaders in their thoughts and prayers.
Congressman Brad Carson, thanks for coming on.
Thank you all so much.
Brad.
And Kent and I'll be back right after this.
Hello, my name is Ted Smith. I'm president of the board of directors of the Oklahoma Disability Law Center. ODLC provides free legal services in civil matters to people with physical and mental disabilities.
I'm Mike Sykes, Vice President of ODLC. For more information, call 1-800-880-7755.
The Oklahoma Disability Law Center provides high-quality legal services to people with physical and mental disabilities.
In Oklahoma, there are more than 1,600 children waiting to be adopted. They're of all ages, and for many, home has been a source of pain and conflict. They've dreamed of finding a better life and a loving family. Consider adoption. For more information, call 1-877-OK-SWIFT or visit the website www.okdhs.org. Adopt. It may be the toughest job you'll ever love.
Boy Scouts of America, where above all else, character counts.
Bringing out the best in each student. That is the simple goal and tradition of Heritage Hall. The focus on the individual shapes the educational experience at Heritage Hall. Each student benefits from small classes, able, dedicated teachers, a a solid academic curriculum, and exceptional co-curricular programs of athletics, arts, community service, and other activities, parental involvement, personalized counseling, and the development of responsibility, integrity, and love of learning. If you want education taught with pride, then you want Heritage Hall.
We are back on The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. Today we visited with United States Congressman Brad Carson. He's a very impressive person.
Well, he's a very fine gentleman. I had the pleasure of practicing law with him for a number of years before he was elected to Congress, and we hated to lose him as a colleague, but we know the 2nd District is well served having him. You know, Brad's an interesting guy. He's fiscally conservative. He's a strong supporter of gun rights, a strong supporter of the Second Amendment, believes Attorney General Ashcroft's position on the Second Amendment is the correct one. At the same time, being very concerned about what's going on in his district with his people, with not only the rich but the poor in his district. He is, once, as we said before, the only Democrat in the congressional delegation. Quite frankly, there are an awful lot of similarities in his background, being a Rhodes Scholar, being elected at a very young age to very important offices, to a lot of similarities to David Boren. It will be interesting to see how Brad's career develops in the Congress. I just think that the 2nd District is very well served, and Oklahoma is very well served to have such a nice balance in Congress of the existing congressmen we have, including Brad Carson.
Let me remind our viewers that we have a website, theverdict.tv. Please get on there and give us your feedback. Give us some ideas for future shows that you'd like to see. For Congressman Brad Carson, Kent Myers, I'm Mick Cornett. We'll see you next week on The Verdict.
This program was brought to you by Crow and Dunlevy, a professional corporation. And also brought to you by a friend of Oklahoma Lawyers for Children and Delta Dental Plan of Oklahoma.